Thanks for tuning in to The Source, your source for celebrity news. Check this out. The other day, Dr. Umar called out celebrities like Steve Harvey and Rickey Smiley and accused them of selling out the black community by allowing Kamala Harris's team to allegedly pay them $10K apiece to promote her candidacy for president. Watch this.
Black vote ain't for sale. We bartering on business. Bring us some tangibles or get out of my face. Rickey Smiley, I love you. Crying on the radio for Kamala Harris, my brother? That's an all-time low. Don't do that again, Rickey Smiley. And cry for Kamala. Don't you do that, my brother. If you want to cry for Kamala Harris, if you want to cry for Kamala Harris, do that in the privacy of your house. But if we're going to be honest, Steve Harvey and Rickey Smiley, and I love you both, but if we're going to be honest, Rickey Smiley and Steve Harvey, y'all only carried on because y'all got paid. Can we please be honest? Can we see? I want y'all to understand, overstand, and understand what King Kong is talking about. Kamala Harris and the Democratic plantation is paying you celebrities to shame black people into voting. Y'all know we not going to get nothing out of that vote.
Now, after Dr. Umar said that, Steve Harvey immediately clapped back. And he was like, who are you kidding? I'm promoting and will continue to promote Kamala Harris because I support her and her platform. And aside from that, can't nobody get Steve Harvey to do nothing for no 10K. In other words, Steve was like,
I don't get out of bed for less than $500,000.
Check this out.
Let me clear the air on something.
Please.
You can't hire Steve Harvey for $10,000 to do nothing. I don't know where you got that number from, but you can't offer Steve Harvey $10,000 to do nothing. You can go through the industry and ask about me. Omar, let me tell you something, man. And there ain't no hate here at all, cause I like some of the work he does. I really do.
Yeah. He said
I don't do nothing. Nothing for $10,000. Don't even insult. Don't insult the brand equity that I've built over these 30 years of television. I just don't. Yeah. And I'm going to freely have her on here again and again and again. I am going to freely ask soft-ass questions, freely lob the basketball so she can slam dunk all these questions. Yes. I'm going to freely sit here and agree.
Okay, so after Steve Harvey said that, Dr. Umar was sitting wherever Dr. Umar sits because you know, Dr. Umar is everywhere. And Dr. Umar was like, all right, I'm getting ready to check this dude. Because you know, for some reason, he has to repeat everything 3 times. Well, anyway, Dr. Umar challenged Steve Harvey, Rickey Smiley, Roland Martin, and D.L. Hughley to a debate.
I want a television debate. I want a television debate with Steve Harvey, D.L. Hughley, Rickey Smiley versus Dr. Umar Ifatunde. Is the Democratic Party the party of African people? Roland Martin can join in too. If they want Roland, they can bring Roland too. I want D.L. Hughley, Steve Harvey, and Rickey Smiley in a debate. Is the Democratic Party the party of the American African? Somebody get Steve Harvey on the phone. Somebody get D.L. Hughley on the phone. Somebody get Rickey Smiley. Dr. Umar wants to come on y'all show and debate you 3-on-1. And if y'all need Roland to help you out, Roland can come too. We can make it 4-on-1. Steve Harvey said that the Omega Psi Phi brothers run the radio. In all respect to my Omega Psi Phi brothers, the late great Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad was a member of Omega Psi Phi, so I'm not going to reduce the Omegas down to 3 men. I'm not going to do that. We're going to keep this about Steve, DL, and Rickey. Okay? Steve, DL, and Rickey. I want a debate. D.L. Hughley, will you debate me on your radio? Steve Harvey, will you debate me on your radio? Rickey Smiley, will you debate me? I'll debate all of you separately or all 3 of you together. Since y'all run black radio, Since y'all run black radio and I run black consciousness, it's only right that we have a clash of kings. Y'all called the kings of comedy, right? The kings of comedy? Let's call it the kings of comedy versus King Kong consciousness. Let's call it the kings of comedy versus King Kong consciousness. Let's call it the kings of comedy versus King Kong consciousness. I'm ready right now. I don't need no prep time. I'm ready right now. Intellectual Ifatunde is ready right now. When we going to do this debate? When we going to do this debate? Steve, Ricky, DL, I want y'all on the stage in front of the people right now.
Alright, so after Dr. Umar said that, DL Hughley came back on social media and he said, I accept Dr. Umar's challenge to debate. However, I have one condition. We have to hold the debate in the auditorium of the school that Dr. Umar's been claiming to be building for like 10, 20, 30 years. Now, after DL Hughley said that, mad people came in the comment section, including Arsenio Hall. And Arsenio Hall was like, bam, way to research a target, touche. But even though everybody was out here shouting, DL Hughley boombaye, DL Hughley boombaye, because they thought Dr. Umar was down for the count, Dr. Umar jumped back up off the mat and accepted DL's terms because he said, the gymnatorium at my school is complete, ninja, now what? But I have one condition of my own. If and when we do this debate, we're going to have to charge the spectators a fee, and I'm going to need those funds to go directly to my school.
DL Hughley. The school is ready. The gymnatorium is ready. DL Hughley thought there was no auditorium. He thought the auditorium wasn't ready. Well, DL, the gymnatorium is a separate building. The gymnatorium is a second building. The gymnatorium is a second building, brother DL Hughley. It's been ready for more than 3 years, sir. You accepted my challenge, sir. You said you will debate me on condition that it takes place at the most honorable Frederick Douglass and most honorable Marcus Garvey Academy. Kings of Comedy versus King Kong Consciousness. You can't back out now. You belong to a fraternity of men. No chickening out now, DL Hughley. The Kings of Comedy versus the King Kong of Consciousness. Steve Harvey, I'm ready. Rickey Smiley, I'm ready. Kings of Comedy, I'm ready. You can run, but you cannot hide. King Kong Consciousness will find you. Intercontinental Ifatunde will find you. The notorious RBG will find you. DL Hughley accepted the challenge, and I am ready to face DL Hughley and Steve Harvey and Rickey Smiley and anybody else y'all want to bring. Let's bring it on. The one-man gang.
Now, after Dr. Umar said that the gymnatorium is ready, a whole bunch of people came in the comment section, and one person said, now, this is how you clear him. DL tried to play Dr. Umar, but the good doctor hit him with the Uno reverse. Okay, so here's my thing. 1. Although I appreciate the vigor with which Dr. Umar is out here calling out celebs that he feels are doing the pay for play during this election cycle, no one ever said that the Democratic Party was the party of black people. Therefore, the premise of the entire debate is skewed from the start. DL Hughley, Rickey Smiley, Roland Martin, and Steve Harvey have simply thrown their support behind the candidate of their choice, which is their right. And they also have the right to advocate for whoever they want, whether they're paid or not, which is also their right. Which brings us to your right, which is this. You don't have to listen to anything that DL Hughley, Rickey Smiley, Roland Martin, or Steve Harvey have to say about the election. You can vote for whoever you want to. Which brings us to point number 2. While this debate seems like it's going to be hella entertaining, as a matter of fact, I can assure you that this debate would be entertaining. We can't forget that we're in the middle of one of the most important election cycles in history, which may determine whether or not we ever have the right to vote again under a democratic system. And the timing of this debate is a little sus. I mean, it only serves as a distraction to sidetrack black voters because it's going to cause black people to tune in to hear Dr. Umar's opinions and DL's opinions, which are really inconsequential right now because neither one of them has the power to change anything, and we really should be focused on Donald Trump's policies and Kamala's proposed policies. But this is the ish that we always do. The house is on fire and we start arguing over what type of hose we need to use to put out the fire. And then we look up and the house done burnt down. I mean, really, what are we really getting from this debate? Dr. Umar is going to get up on that stage and he's going to argue that the Democratic Party is not the party for black people, and then DL Hughley is going to get up right behind him and say, yeah, I know, but it's better than the alternative. And then we're all going to turn off the TV, we're going to get something to eat, we're going to go get some sleep, and then we're going to wake up the next day and guess what? Things are going to be the same. Why? Because neither one of these Negroes has the ability to affect change on the level that Trump and Kamala Harris do right now. Which is why I would suggest to all my black brothers and sisters that we pay less attention to this debate between Dr. Umar and DL and pay more attention to the policies that Trump and Kamala Harris are putting out right now. And I know, somebody's going to come in the comment section like, Source, how the hell are we supposed to know what their policies are? Neither one of these two are telling us anything. I know. Which is why I'm getting ready to do something that nobody on this internet has done for you yet during this election cycle, and that is give you an unbiased, nonpartisan breakdown of what both of these two believe on different topics, so that when you walk into the voting booth this November, you can walk in with your head up, because you, sir and madam, are going to be informed voters. Alright, so here we go. As far as democracy is concerned, Trump says vote for him and you won't have to vote again in 4 years. This will be the last time that you have to vote. And as far as executive power is concerned, Trump's approach to executive power often emphasized a robust assertive role for the presidency, which sometimes raised concerns about potential dictatorships and overreach. Now, as far as Kamala is concerned, when it comes to democracy, Kamala says that if you ever want to vote again, she's your only choice because she believes in term limits and the fair and democratic transition of power. Now, as far as executive power is concerned, Harris as a senator and vice president has generally advocated for a balanced approach to executive power with checks and balances that respect both the role of the presidency and the other branches of government. Alright, so that brings us to the next topic, economic policies. Trump wants to make America's economy less reliant on taxes and put tariffs on imports coming into the country. As a matter of fact, he wants to place a 10% tariff on all imports, and when it comes to China, he wants to bump that up to 60% on all imports coming in from China. Now, he also wants to extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, which extended tax cuts and lowered the corporate tax rate to 21%. After he does that, he wants to deregulate the banks and he wants to eliminate taxes on tipped wages. On the other hand, Kamala's tax policy proposals are more focused on middle-class tax cuts. Kamala proposes a new $6,000 tax credit for families with newborns and aims to restore the expanded child tax credit from the American Rescue Plan. She also wants to reduce income inequality by giving the middle class and working class a $500 a month refundable tax credit up to $6,000 per couple annually. And this tax credit can be redeemed in $500 a month increments to help with household expenses instead of families having to wait till they file their taxes. And last but not least, like Trump, she also wants to eliminate taxes on tipped wages. And that brings us to their healthcare policies. Trump wants to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act that was put into place by Barack Obama. He also advocates for the expansion of short-term health care plans and doesn't support Medicare for all or the creation of optional public health care plans similar to Medicare. He lowered insulin copays for some beneficiaries, supported the repeal of Roe v. Wade, court-packed the Supreme Court with justices that are pro-life and voted to overturn Roe v. Wade in 2022, and signed an act requiring non-governmental organizations receiving federal funding to agree to neither perform nor actively promote abortion as a method of family planning in this country or any other country. On the other end of the spectrum, Kamala Harris supports a public option for healthcare and also supports the Affordable Care Act, which was put into place by Barack Obama. Her platform also has an emphasis on mental health and women's health services. She also wants to put a $35 cap on drugs like insulin. And last but not least, she supports reproductive rights and Roe v. Wade. After the 2022 U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, she called on Congress to pass a new law guaranteeing access to the procedure for women across the country. She also wants to require any state-passed law limiting reproductive freedoms to undergo approval from the Department of Justice before being enacted. Alright, so where's that bring us? That brings us to housing. As far as housing is concerned, Trump has promised to lower housing costs by stopping the unsustainable invasion of illegal aliens, which he says is driving up housing costs. He also pledges to deport undocumented immigrants, which could cut back temporarily on housing demand. And Trump also promises to fix affordability through lowering borrowing costs and deregulating the banks. He pledges to eliminate costly regulations and free up appropriate portions of federal land for housing. Now, when it comes to housing, Kamala Harris has a totally different approach than Trump. Kamala promises to increase housing supply by expanding the low-income housing tax credit, providing incentives for state and local investment in housing, and creating a $40 billion tax credit to make affordable projects economically feasible for builders. She also wants to spur home construction and proposes giving $25,000 in federal assistance to first-time homebuyers so that they can afford to buy new homes. And she also says that she worked closely with President Biden to infuse $5.5 billion into the housing market to boost housing supply, lower housing costs, expand rental assistance, and enhance renter protections. And that brings us to everybody's favorite topic, which is inflation. When it comes to inflation, Trump has promised to pay off the national debt, which is now $35 trillion, of which he added nearly $8 trillion the last time he was president. He also proposed eliminating taxes on Social Security benefits to help seniors cope with inflation. And he says that on day one, he plans to sign an executive order that directs all agency heads and cabinet secretaries to use every tool and authority at their disposal to defeat inflation and to bring down consumer prices for all Americans. Kamala, on the other hand, proposes a federal ban on price gouging, particularly on groceries. And she says that she wants to place stricter regulations on corporations who profit off of running the prices up. Kamala says that she wants to target businesses that aren't playing by the rules by illegally hiking prices. She also noted that ensuring competition in the industry is essential to bringing down grocery costs for Americans. Kamala also wants to implement the bipartisan infrastructure law, which could mean that goods move through the market more quickly and cheaper and foster new investments in the U.S. for critical goods that were driven up by inflation during the pandemic. Alright, so how am I doing so far? I told you I was going to be non-biased and non-partisan. And listen, I'm trying my best. So be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And that brings us to a biggie, which is foreign policy. So far, Trump has been very critical on NATO, previously suggesting that the U.S. might withdraw from the alliance if other member nations do not contribute more financially. On China, Trump has taken a hardline stance on China, advocating for higher tariffs on Chinese goods and proposing new restrictions on Chinese-owned infrastructure in the U.S. He's also focused heavily on reducing Chinese influence in the U.S. economy and military affairs. Alright, so when it comes to the Middle East and Israel, Trump is a staunch supporter of Israel, and he also moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem during his presidency. He also has vowed to end conflicts like those going on in Gaza through decisive action. On the contrary, Kamala Harris supports maintaining strong relationships with NATO and other allies. When it comes to China, Harris has criticized Trump's handling of China, particularly regarding trade. She supports a balanced approach to addressing human rights issues while maintaining strategic competition. She also voiced strong support for Taiwan's self-defense. When it comes to the Middle East and Israel, Harris supports a two-state solution for Israel and Palestine and has been more cautious about Israel's military actions in Gaza, sometimes advocating for restraint. As a matter of fact, Kamala Harris has called for an immediate ceasefire given the immense scale of suffering going on in Gaza. Now, when it comes to Iran, the Ukraine, and Russia, Trump and Kamala also have two very different ideas on how to handle the situations. For example, in Iran, Trump withdrew from Iran's nuclear deal in 2018 and implemented severe sanctions on Iran as part of a maximum pressure strategy. He also ordered the killing of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. Now, as far as the Ukraine and Russia are concerned, Trump has expressed skepticism about prolonged U.S. involvement in Ukraine, suggesting that he would end the conflict quickly through negotiations. He's also been critical of U.S. financial aid to the Ukraine and has indicated that he would reconsider the level of support that we're giving Ukraine. Now, if we move to the left, we got Kamala. And Kamala supports the 2015 Iranian nuclear deal and believes in diplomacy to limit Iran's nuclear ambitions. She also opposes the maximum pressure sanction strategy that was employed by Donald Trump. When it comes to the Ukraine and Russia, as Vice President, Harris has been a strong supporter of Ukraine, advocating for continued U.S. military aid and transatlantic cooperation to resist Russian aggression. She emphasizes holding Russia accountable for crimes against humanity and has pledged to support Ukraine for as long as necessary. And that brings us to immigration. During his time in office, Trump implemented the zero-tolerance policy, which led to the prosecution of all illegal border crosses, resulting in family separations as children were taken from their parents while adults were held in detention. He also prioritized building a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border to prevent illegal immigration, and he significantly reduced the number of refugees allowed into the U.S. During the same time, he issued an executive order which restricted travel from several predominantly Muslim countries, and he also enforced the public charge rule, which made it more difficult for immigrants who might use public benefits like food stamps or housing assistance to obtain green cards. Alright, so when it comes to immigration, Kamala has a whole different approach, and she supports a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, especially for those brought to the U.S. as children. She also supports addressing the root causes of migration, particularly from Central America. She wants to look into investing in economic development, combating corruption, and improving security in those countries so that all of those people don't want to come here. She also wants to modernize the immigration system by improving border security and ensuring fair and humane treatment of migrants. And last but not least, she also supports the DACA program, which provides temporary protection from deportation for undocumented individuals who were brought to the U.S. as children. But since we're talking about children, we gotta discuss education. Trump favors reducing federal regulations on educational institutions, especially for-profit colleges, to encourage flexibility and innovation. He also supports school choice. He's a strong advocate for school choice, including vouchers and charter schools, which he believes will give parents more options outside of the traditional public schools. And he also has suggested doing away with the DOE. Trump has suggested dismantling the Department of Education and shifting more control to the states and to the local governments. Now, as far as education is concerned, when it comes to Kamala Harris, she supports broad student debt cancellation, emphasizing relief for lower and middle income borrowers. She also advocates for free community college and making public universities tuition free for families earning under $125,000. When it comes to early education, she's a strong proponent of expanding early childhood education, including universal pre-K, and she also says that she wants to focus on reducing racial disparities in education by increasing funding for historically black colleges and universities, aka HBCUs, and minority serving institutions. But since we mentioned racial disparities, let's discuss civil rights. When Trump was in office, he effectively rolled back the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Rule, which required local governments to address patterns of racial segregation and discrimination in housing. He also banned transgender individuals from serving in the military. He also rolled back protections for LGBTQ+ people in healthcare and employment. He also signed the First Step Act into law in 2018. Under the First Step Act, 91.3% of the 1,051 people who received retroactive sentencing under the act were black. However, it's important to note that according to the U.S. Sentencing Commission report, 7,748 people received retroactive reductions to their prison sentences under Obama's Fair Sentencing Act of 2010, which means that the First Step Act was actually less effective than the Fair Sentencing Act. Now, on Kamala's end, she supported expanding civil rights protections focused on issues of systemic racism and inequality. As VP, she's been a strong advocate for voting rights, police reform, and measures to reduce racial disparities in various sectors, including healthcare and the criminal justice system. She also supports LGBTQ+ rights, including same-sex marriage and protections against discrimination. She also supported the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, the Equality Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, the Paycheck Fairness Act and proposed anti-lynching legislation, which was passed by Congress. And speaking about things that Congress won't pass, let's discuss gun control. When it comes to gun control, Trump generally supports Second Amendment rights and opposes many new gun control measures. He also opposes stricter regulations. He's against implementing stricter background checks and bans on certain types of guns. He's also focused on mental health and emphasizes improving mental health services as a way to address gun violence rather than more gun regulations. Trump also advocates for state control and prefers popular sovereignty, which means he wants the states to have more authority over their own gun laws rather than federal mandates. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, Kamala advocates for stricter regulations and supports more comprehensive gun control measures, including universal background checks and assault weapon bans. Kamala also wants to promote laws that allow the temporary removal of firearms from individuals who are deemed at risk to themselves or others. She also emphasizes measures to prevent gun violence, including stronger enforcement of existing laws and funding for community safety programs. And last but not least, she wants to improve federal standards by supporting more uniform federal regulations to ensure consistent gun control measures across states. Which brings us to law and order. When it comes to law and order, Trump is a strong supporter of law enforcement agencies and emphasizes law and order by backing police funding and supporting tougher measures against crime. He supports qualified immunity for police officers who are accused of committing crimes, whether or not they committed the crime or not. And Trump is staunchly against the movement to defund or reform police departments, arguing that it undermines public safety. Now, when it comes to law and order, Kamala, who used to be a prosecutor, supports reforming the criminal justice system to address issues like mass incarceration, racial disparities, and the use of mandatory minimum sentences. She also supports community policing and improving police-community relations rather than solely focusing on increasing law enforcement presence. Kamala also says that she supports police accountability and backs measures to increase transparency and accountability in policing, including body cameras and independent investigations of police misconduct. She also says that she wants to address the root causes of crime, such as economic inequality and lack of access to education, as part of a broader approach to law and order. And that brings us to jobs and employment. Trump has emphasized bringing manufacturing jobs back to the U.S., with policies aimed at revitalizing the manufacturing sector and reducing reliance on overseas production. Trump renegotiated trade agreements and imposed tariffs, particularly on China, to protect American jobs and industries. However, some economists say that this also led to tensions and some job losses. However, Trump says that he's going to continue to reduce regulations in order to make it easier for businesses to operate and expand, potentially leading to more job creation. And he also implemented tax cuts for businesses, aiming to stimulate economic growth and job creation by the trickle-down theory, which means he lowered the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21% in hopes that those cuts will trickle down to the masses. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, Kamala says she supports investment in infrastructure as a way to create jobs and to modernize the transportation and public works system. She also wants to expand green energy and sustainability jobs, aiming to address climate change while also creating employment opportunities in renewable energy and environmental conservation. Kamala also supports raising the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour and also pledges to support small businesses and strengthen worker protections, including better healthcare benefits, paid family leave, and protections for gig workers and those in precarious employment. And since we mentioned green jobs and the climate, we might as well elaborate on what these two want to do with regard to climate control. Alright, when it comes to the climate, Trump withdrew from the Paris Climate Agreement. He also wants to deregulate environmental protections. He supports fossil fuels and, in the immortal words of Sarah Palin, Trump wants to drill baby drill. He wants to untap America's raw materials and resources that are right under our feet. On the other end of the spectrum, Kamala Harris wants to rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement, invest in green energy and jobs, and she says she has very ambitious climate goals, including net zero emissions. And last but not least, the thing that DL Hughley and Dr. Umar and Steve Harvey and all of these other black folk really care about the most. What have both of these candidates promised to black voters? Alright, Trump says that he's going to create more black jobs and that the blacks are going to be so happy because he's going to do more for blacks than anybody else has ever done for blacks. I mean, what he's going to do for blacks is going to be so huge, humongous, and tremendous, you just wait and see. And as far as Kamala's concerned, she says that she's going to be a president for all people, so she's not specifically going to do anything for black people. However, black people and all people will benefit from her commitment to reducing systematic racism by addressing disparities in housing, employment, criminal justice, and the wealth gap. This includes support for initiatives aimed at reducing racial inequality and promoting social justice. So no, Kamala Harris says that she doesn't specifically have an agenda that's pointed directly towards black people, but she says that not only black people, but all people will specifically benefit from her agenda. See, I just saved you mad time when it comes to doing research, and I didn't offer my personal opinion not once. I'm so proud of myself, and if you're proud of me and found this information to be beneficial, hit me off with a like, and be sure to share this video so that more people out there are informed when it comes time to go to the polls. Listen, let me know what you think about Dr. Umar saying that Steve Harvey got paid like $10K to support and promote Kamala Harris. Steve Harvey saying, hell nah, I don't do nothing for $10K. Dr. Umar jumping back online and challenging DL Hughley, Steve Harvey, Rickey Smiley, and Roland Martin to a debate, and DL accepting the challenge on one condition, that the debate is held in the school that Dr. Umar has been building for like the last 10 years. And Umar coming back and saying, let's do this, cause my gymnatorium is complete. Also, let me know what you think about Trump and Kamala Harris's policies. Did this breakdown help you in any way, shape, or form when it comes to making your choice? Let me know in the comments, and while you're down there leaving a comment, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends. Hey yo, thanks for tuning in to The Source, your source for celebrity news. Peace.